And by my friend Alex Wilkes, Executive Director of America Rising, as we close in toward midterm election day. Alex, how are you today?
I'm great, thanks. Thanks so much for having me on.
My pleasure. Good to have you back. I saw some interesting numbers today that I'm sure you probably have seen as well. It was plastered all over Drudge earlier. Nate Silver, the guy at 538, now saying that the Democrats have an 86% chance of retaking the House, which was encouraging to me because it was also Nate Silver who said that Hillary Clinton had a 71.4% chance of being the next president of the United States back in 2016. So let's hope he's as accurate this time as he was 2 years ago.
Yeah, you're reminding me of election night when that dial started to just go back and back and back for Hillary Clinton. All of us were watching the pundits in horror of course, on cable news. But, look, I think that this blue wave has sort of been overhyped from the beginning.
Yep.
Now, of course, we know in a midterm election that traditionally the party in power loses seats, and the Republicans have a lot of seats to lose. We've been winning a lot over the last couple of midterm cycles. So I think that, that was expected. I think what happened, though, is that the Democrats went from focusing on those Clinton districts. So these are districts that the president did not win in 2016, but you have a Republican congressman in there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a natural place for them to start. A lot of suburban women, a lot of people that we would be concerned about this time around that be voting in these districts. But then they sort of got greedy, and they were talking about this blue wave. They started to expand their projections outwards of like 60 or 70 seats. And they started to invest in places like Arkansas' 2nd District. The only problem for them now is that their guy is down by 12, and they've dumped a bunch of money into it.
Uh-oh.
So I think, and I think that there are a couple reasons why this is at play here. Number one, I think that, politics as usual really changed after 2016.
Exactly.
And it really remains to be seen how a midterm cycle unfolds in this new world order. I also think that the Kavanaugh hearings, that was just a major fork in the road for, voters who were maybe on the fence, certainly Republican voters who needed that extra kick of enthusiasm to get out the door. And I think just, lastly, I think it's the general incivility that you're seeing out there from Democrats, calls from Eric Holder to kick Republicans, Maxine Water, let's go after them at gas stations and restaurants. People look at that, particularly independents, and they're like, that's just not a credible alternative.
Yeah, and Hillary Clinton misspeaking a week or so ago, saying, well, look, if you want civility back, you've got to put Democrats in power. And my response to that was, what, the kind of civility we saw from Democrats in the Kavanaugh hearings?
Precisely right. And it's worth noting that, people already did get hurt as a result of this rhetoric. I mean, look no further than Representative Steve Scalise, who was one of the victims of the baseball shooting attack that happened in 2017. And so, I think that independents who have been looking, to the Democrats, maybe, because, again, it's a midterm cycle, and traditionally you get people who maybe want to put a check on the White House no matter what the party is.
Mm-hmm.
People are saying to themselves, well, the economy is doing pretty well. And Democrats are just, they're not only not making the case for themselves, they're making the case against themselves when they engage in this kind of rhetoric and behavior.
Well, Alex, and we're talking with Alex Wilkes, who is Executive Director of America Rising. It says in the book that pride cometh before fall, and I think the Democrats have gotten wrought up with hubris, got too far out over their skis by possibly feeling more enthused about many of these races, like, as you mentioned, Arkansas too, than they should have. And you touched on something that has been in the back of my mind as well, Alex, and that is we hear all the time from the pundits about, well, historically this and historically that in the midterms. And yet the 2016 election kind of shifted the paradigm entirely. It makes you wonder if, since we're talking about Donald Trump, even though his name is not on the ballot, obviously his policies are, can we, at least to some degree, toss out these historical records?
I mean, look, I think that it remains to be seen in terms of how this election cycle is going to work. Certainly the president is an unconventional figure, and he upended the political system as we knew it in 2016. So I would say that, betting on what's normal is perhaps not the best way to go in this election cycle, but we're just going to have to see, what election day bears out on that front. But we do know that there are just a host of abnormalities about this midterm cycle.
You bet.
A really good example of this is in New Jersey. So everyone thinks of New Jersey as a blue state, even though there are quite a few Republican congressmen in New Jersey. You have Bob Menendez here running for re-election as a U.S. Senator. He's one of 12 sitting U.S. Senators ever to be indicted. He was reprimanded by the Senate Ethics Committee, even though his trial ultimately ended in a mistrial. He has all kinds of sleazy allegations against him. I mean, the stench of corruption follows him wherever he goes.
Yeah, you look up ethically challenged in the dictionary, and his picture is there.
You find Bob Menendez. That's
yes.
right. So he's running against a great guy named Bob Hugan, who former Marine, pharmaceutical CEO, who is positive. He's running to bring back sort of the image of the state. And Bob Menendez is polling so dangerously close that the Senate Majority PAC, which is Chuck Schumer's super PAC,
right,
had to send in $3 million to help him. That's $3 million that didn't go to Claire McCaskill or didn't go to Bill Nelson, who are running very close races in states the president won. And Menendez is actually counting on something that the political scientists in New Jersey have, basically don't have any sort of conception of how it's going to work out, which is that he's depending on a blue wave, supposedly, in the congressional districts to surge from the bottom up through the ticket to boost his reelection prospects. Normally it's the other way around.
Yeah.
The top of the ticket, boosts everybody else, whereas he's actually counting on the people below him to try to save him, which is just very strange. And no one here, and none of the political prognosticators can tell you how that works out. No one can tell you what is the end result of that trend.
Yeah, it tells you something about just how tenuous the situation may be in New Jersey, that he's counting on riding on the coattails of congressional candidates to lift him back into the U.S. Senate. It's absurd.
It absolutely is absurd. Look, I think that we're seeing all kinds of places where Democrats are starting to rethink their strategy. The Minnesota's 8th district, for example, that was a Democratic seat that was expected to be a Democratic hold. It's looking like the Republicans are going to actually pick that one up. California's 21st district was supposed to be one that flipped. Again, that's another one that the Republicans are likely to pick up now. And, probably one of my favorite examples is in Nebraska's 2nd district, where you have Cara Eastman running. She was not the Democrats' preferred pick in the primary, mainly because she's running on Medicare for all, so socialist-style health care, and free tuition for everybody. And she's running on that platform in, a moderate suburban district. So, that's not playing well. And that was one of the seats that the Democrats had expected to flip prior to the primary. So there are a couple places where they're having to shift money around to rethink their strategy because they no longer see this huge expanded map that they potentially saw in the spring.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people are smart enough now to recognize that when we hear Medicare for all, we're talking about Medicare for no one is what they really mean. Alex Wilkes is the Executive Director of America Rising. Alex, thanks a lot for bringing us up to speed on a number of these races. We're going to continue to watch it closely and keep our fingers crossed that the GOP is able to retain control of the House here 13 days away.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on.
My pleasure. Thank you, Alex. Hope you have a good day. Appreciate your time.